We've defined market equilibrium as a price at which quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So in this example, at a price of 300, quantity demanded equals quantity supplied equals 20. Well, what happens if a market is not in equilibrium? One possibility is the price is either too high or too low. So here is an example of a price which is below the equilibrium price. Oops. Consider a price of 200. At a price of 200, that's good for consumers, right? We have more people who demand this product than producers who are willing to supply. And so what we have in this example is a market shortage. We've said before that over time, there should be some upward pressure on price, right? Suppliers are going to realize that they can't keep this item off the shelf. There's much more demand than supply for it. Realize that they can and should charge a higher price. Price will go up towards the equilibrium. In the short run, or in a snapshot, while the price is different from the equilibrium price, we can talk about the implications on market surplus and efficiency. So we're going to see that economically speaking, prices or quantities which differ from the equilibrium are not efficient. All right, so what's happening in this market? Well, remember, at this lower price, we don't have as many suppliers who are willing to sell, though we do have a lot of consumers who would like to buy at the low price over here. But the total quantity in this market is limited to the number that suppliers are willing to sell, which is 10. So our quantity is cut off here at 10, and we have this area of deadweight loss created, which is the quantity that would have been produced and sold on the market, but wasn't. All right, so our deadweight loss, the area of it, is this triangle of total surplus that would have existed if 20 units were produced and sold, but nobody is getting this surplus because nobody is selling these units or consuming them. All right, we can also talk about the implications for producers and consumers. We can see that for producer surplus at the lower price and lower quantity, this triangle, the yellow one, is very clearly smaller than producer surplus was before. Producer surplus before would have been this larger triangle up to the equilibrium price and quantity. Right, so producer surplus has definitely fallen. What about consumer surplus? Well, consumer surplus, they've lost some amount over here. So some consumers who would have been willing and able to purchase these units don't. And so they lose some surplus. However, there's some surplus gained over here because the consumers who are able to purchase are purchasing at a lower price. So what's happened overall to consumer surplus? We're not exactly sure. We would need to actually calculate, right? We could calculate the area lost here. We could calculate the area gained here and see which one is bigger. We don't actually have a number up here, so we won't actually be doing that in this example. But the general idea is at a below equilibrium price, producer surplus has definitely fallen. Consumer surplus could go up or down. We aren't exactly sure. It would depend on the specific scenario. All right, we haven't really introduced a government, and this class doesn't really focus on government. The question of, what would a functioning government do, and what is the justification for having government? And as we, really we could do an entire class on that, and in the in-person class, we do some discussion on that topic. I encourage you to stop and think about, what that question means to you. It's everybody's going to have slightly different opinions on that, but moving forward, our generation is going to be confronted with the issue of what is government, optimally, what would a functioning government do? Well, in this model, we're again just kind of assuming that there is a government. We haven't defined really the purpose of the government, but suppose that there's a government that has the power to institute what we call price ceilings or price floors. What's a price ceiling or a price floor? Well, a price ceiling, if you think of yourself in space, if a ceiling is functioning, you shouldn't be able to go above the ceiling. So the price ceiling causes the price not to be able to go above a certain amount. This usually is supposed to protect consumers who like lower prices. A price floor, you think of what a floor does, it stops you from falling through it. So a functioning price floor would stop the price from falling below a certain amount and is usually used to protect producers. So what are the impacts? Well, we already showed what happened if the price is too high or too low in a market. So what if we have what's called a price ceiling here? A price ceiling is going to stop the price from going above a certain amount. And it's only going to matter if that amount is below the equilibrium price. So if our price here is up at the equilibrium, and then a government comes into this market and says, all right, actually the price can't go above this amount, we have a shortage situation created, right? Only this number of suppliers are willing to supply at the lower price. Consumers like that. They want to buy it. So we have a shortage in this market. If we have a price floor matters if it's above the price, can't go below. All right, so instead of the equilibrium price, the government is saying in this market, price can't come below this higher price. Suppliers would like to sell that a higher quantity. Consumers aren't willing and able to pay it. So this creates a surplus. What's the effect of a price ceiling that's set above the market equilibrium? Well, where is our price ceiling example? All right, so here's our price ceiling. Market price would be the equilibrium price. The government says it can't go above this amount. So there's a shortage created in the market. What if the price ceiling was up here? If the price ceiling is somewhere up above the equilibrium price, say the equilibrium price is 100, let's pick an easy number. The government says, the price can't go above 150. What's going to be the impact in the market? There isn't going to be any impact because the price already isn't going above that. All right, so I think we have some graphs here illustrating, hopefully, what happens to surplus. Oh, I guess they're not in here, but let's talk about it. All right, so in the case of a price ceiling, what's going to happen to total surplus in this market? Well, at this lower price, only this many sellers are willing to supply. So quantity is going to be cut off right here. You could think about imposing a vertical line here. I guess maybe I should update these slides so that that's shown on there. And then we're going to have some deadweight loss, which would be the quantity in here, which at equilibrium would be sold. But because we have this price ceiling, sellers are only willing to supply this amount. So only this amount is sold on the market. We got some deadweight loss. At the lower price, producer surplus is going to go down, and we would need to do some calculating to figure out what happened to consumer surplus. Right, in the price floor example, here, now we have a higher price. Price can't go below this amount. Consumers don't really like that very much. They're not willing to buy as much. Suppliers would sell it, but we don't have people who are willing to purchase. So once again, the quantity is cut off at this amount. We could superimpose a vertical line right here and then calculate the deadweight loss as this triangle in here of surplus that would have been generated if people were producing and purchasing at the equilibrium, but is not generated because only this number of consumers are willing to buy. At the high price, we can see that consumer surplus has definitely fallen. It would have been a triangle that looked like this all the way to the equilibrium price, but now it's going to be a smaller triangle just to here at this higher price. Producers, once again, they're going to be losing a little bit of surplus from the quantity that isn't sold, but gaining some amount due to the higher price. So we would need to do some calculating to see what happens to producer surplus in that example. All right, so again, what's the effect of a price ceiling? that's set above the equilibrium price. A price ceiling stops a price from going higher than a certain amount. In theory, the price won't go above the equilibrium, so no change. What will an effective price ceiling do? Well, once again, a price ceiling will cause the price to not go above a certain amount. So the selling price should remain below its equilibrium. It won't change the equilibrium price. This is a non-equilibrium result. All right, here, what is a price? A price floor is imposed here at PF, so the price can't go below this amount. Does this price floor matter? Yes, it does, because the price would go below it to the equilibrium. So what's going to be the quantity sold on the market? There's basically two options here, Q1 or Q2. So how many are going to be actually sold? Well, at this higher price, the price floor price, only this many consumers want to purchase, even though we have more sellers who would sell at the higher price. So only Q1 will actually be purchased and sold on this market. We'll have some deadweight loss here, this triangle. Consumer surplus is going to fall due to the higher price. Some producers will gain some surplus. Some producers won't be able to sell. So the total change to producer surplus we would need to calculate. Right, in the next video, we'll talk about a couple critiques of the supply-demand model.